Hello, boys and girls. This is your virtual Art Vista's docent. I am Mrs. Eklund, and I am here to do the follow-up activity that goes with hopefully the slideshows that you'd watch about people and animals. So this is the follow-up activity, and we're going to be making imaginary animals. Even though all the pictures in the slides that you looked at with your other art docent were not imaginary, we're going to be doing some imaginary ones. And what you'll need for this is some paper, and preferably you would have paint, but if you don't, that's okay. We're going to work with what we have. So if you have paint, I highly suggest putting it on a paper plate like I have done here. If you have the primary colors, you can mix them together to make other colors, like we know red and blue make purple, and if you have white, you can make pink with a little red, and if you have black, you can make darker colors. So but we're going to just use what we have. If you're painting, a way to make sure you can paint is by promising your parents you will clean up afterwards, and also laying down some placemats or some newspaper to make sure you cover your tabletop. So you're also going to need some brushes, hopefully a wider one and a skinnier one. If you do not have two brushes, again, just use what you have. If you're going to paint, if you have paint, you'll need some water, and you will need a paper towel to dry off your paintbrush. If you do not have paint, you can totally use markers like Sharpies or just crayons or chalk, or if you have oil pastels, whatever you have, you can totally make this work. So, like I said, we're going to be doing an imaginary animal. So you get to think about any type of imaginary animal you can. So like, what if there was an animal that was half alligator or half zebra or half bird and half elephant? So think about different ways or different animals that you could come up with. It could be more than just half. You could have a combination of these elements. So I've gone ahead on this piece of paper on the other side. I have drawn my fake animal. See it? It's kind of a combination of a pig bear with a butterfly body and some bird talons at the bottom. However, there is something not quite right about my drawing here. And if you've guessed that I've just done it in the tiny corner and I haven't utilized the rest of my space or made my drawing balanced, you are correct. We're going to need to make this a more balanced picture. So when you are thinking about your animal, please make sure it takes up a large piece of your drawing. So I redid it. And this is my pig drawing now. See, I drew a pig face and I added some texture with these curly Q hair at the top. And I added some background with the clouds and the mountains in the back because I think that my pig, bear, butterfly, bird, whatever you want to call it, a thingamajig, lives outside in the forest. So I added some hills and trees in the background. And then in the foreground here, closer to my pig, bear, butterfly, eagle, I drew a bush with some flowers because I'm going to go ahead and say that this animal eats nectar. So I put some flowers there. I put a stream towards the bottom that I'm going to paint and hopefully add some wavy lines to it when I'm painting to add some texture to look like it's flowing water. So you go ahead and think of whatever type of animal you would like to draw. And then I'm going to show you some tips on how to paint your animal. So if you want to pause this and draw your animal before you paint, or you can watch the whole video first. If you do not have paint, like I said, you can totally make this with markers. So this is another thing I made. I'm going to call it a cat chicken. So it has the head of a cat and the body of a chicken. And with markers, I was able to add a lot of texture. Like I started to add like this crisscross thatching type on the ground. I used tiny dots for the feet so that it looks like it's rough. And then for the body, instead of coloring it totally full, I did little streaks or lines so it kind of looks like fur or feathers. So if I touched it, it might be fluffy. And then in the background, instead of making it realistic, I chose to do some swirls and some wavy lines. So your background does not have to be realistic. And the great thing about this is that everybody's going to pick different animals to make, and everybody's going to paint or color them different, and it's going to turn out fantastic. And so what you're going to do is you're going to draw first, and with a light color, like I said, I didn't use a light colored crayon to draw like it said in the instructions, because if I did that, then you wouldn't be able to see it on my video. So if you're going to draw with a light colored crayon, it'll help your when you paint, it'll help not show those lines as much. But I'm going to go ahead and show you some painting tips. And in my mind, I think it's going to turn out one way, but it usually is not what happens when I paint. When I paint, it usually ends up much different, and that's okay. So because of my camera and the way that I have it angled, you're going to be seeing this bottom half of my painting, and that's totally fine. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take my bigger brush because I'm going to start coloring in the wing here. So I think I'm just going to pick a color that I've already have on my plate here, and I'm going to start filling in the wing. So something that is helpful when you're painting is that sometimes you might want to add something like 2 different colors together. And you're going to want to make sure that one, your paintbrush is completely cleaned before you start adding the other color. And for example, for this wing here, if I wanted to add some polka dots on top, which I think would make this really fun, I'm going to want to paint first the background color that I want, and then I'm going to let it dry and then go back and add stripes or polka dots or whatever I think would look nice. So you want to make sure that your base color, or the color that you want in the background of something like this, like my wing, you want to make sure it's dry before painting the rest on top. Otherwise it's just going to get all muddy. So I'm rinsing my brush, and then I'm going to now that it's rinsed, I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm going to pinch the rest of the color and water off. And so that when I do this, well, see, there's still, maybe it needs another dunk. I'm going to dunk it one more time in the water, and now I'm going to pull it off, and now look at no blue lines. So I know that if I decided to start painting this water at the bottom and I grabbed a different color like this blue down here, I'm not going to be mixing my colors. So when I'm painting this blue on the bottom, if I wanted to add some texture, oops, you're not seeing that, sorry. I kind of like how it looks wavy like that, and so I might just, oops, see, I'm getting it on my background thing, that's okay. I might just do that when I'm painting instead of doing straight strokes with my brush. I'm going to do some wavy strokes and see how that makes more movement in my picture. I like how there's this movement going on, and it doesn't, it's adding texture. So I'm not just going to brush straight across, I'm going to move my brush so that it adds texture and a different depth to my painting. So hopefully I'm going to go back and touch this. And ooh, it's nice and dry. I don't have any. Ooh, just kidding. I do have some on my finger. But for the most part, this is dry. You're going to let yours dry a little bit more than mine has. And when I'm going to add some dots, but instead of using the paintbrush tip, I'm going to use the bottom of my paintbrush, and I'm going to dip it in a color like so. And now I'm going to add some dots to my wings of my animal that I created. And I like the way that that turns out so that there's not too much paint, but again, you can do whatever you want. Nobody's art is going to be the same. So I don't want to paint this entire picture so that you get bored. You don't need to watch me paint my entire picture. And I also want you to be creative and think of things to do on your own picture, because nobody's picture is going to look the same. Hopefully you're thinking of your own imaginary animal to draw. And I just wanted to show you one more thing that you might want to go back, and if you want to make your animal the focal point, when you're done and the paint is totally dry, you can go back with like a marker and outline, even though, see, I didn't do, and outline your animal with this marker, although I'm not doing that great of a job. And then that way it stands out more from the background. Like if I was going to paint this background green, and since I chose a very similar color that's made out of green for the wings, if I wanted to make it pop, I could go back with a Sharpie or a black marker and trace around my animal so that the it pops out and stands out from the rest. Or for example, see, I have this little smiley face instead of just an open mouth, or however I would want to make my mouth. This smiley face is, if I chose to paint this pink or whatever color, once I paint it, you're not going to see this detail. So I would wait until my paint has dried, and I'd come back and I can use a Sharpie or a black marker and I can add that detail in so that it stands out or that it has a mouth. Or if I was really sure of my painting skills, I could totally paint it pink. Like, let me show you if I was going to paint it pink. I'm going to use my small brush. Whoop, that didn't get any paint on it. If I painted it pink, see how it's gone? If I was really sure of my brush skills, like I thought I had a really small detailed brush and I could come back in here. So after I painted this pink and let it dry, I could come back in with a different color and paint. But if you're feeling like, I don't have a small enough brush to add that detail, adding your Sharpie at the end is a great way to add that detail back to your painting. You just have to make sure it's completely dry before doing that. And that's all the instruction I'm going to give you, because I can't wait to see what your brain thinks of for an imaginary animal. So whether it be a cat, chicken, or some other type of creature, I'm sure you can think of a lot of creative ways to do it. And if you have paint, awesome. If you don't have paint, awesome. We're going to work with what we have. And most of all, we're going to have fun. So enjoy making your animal.